So, from a Broadway Shakespeare to a Bollywood Shakespeare. Vishal Bhardwaj's Omkara is a 2006 Indian release with music by Bhardwaj himself and lyrics by Gulzar, starring such Hindi heavy hitters as Ajay Devgan, Nasiruddin Shah, Kareena Kapoor, and her future husband, Saif Ali Khan. And it pretty much hits all the major Bollywood tropes. A runtime approaching 3 hours, perpetual tonal schizophrenia, a menagerie of shockingly photogenic humans in outfits of diverse hues, and of course, drawn-out, elaborate musical numbers.
I just call to say I love you.
Just kidding.
Cue
the Omkara! But unlike other Bollywood musicals, which have a tendency to let their plots stop entirely to let their musical numbers start, this song is deeply ingrained into the plot of the movie. The people are singing about roaring passions to keep you warm through the night. One verse ominously mentions being unjustly accused of crimes. All of these men are thugs for a local corrupt politician. They function like lieutenants in an army. The man with the buzz cut hates the guy with the mop top, the one who's getting close to his girlfriend, the singer. He hates him because he got a major promotion instead of him, despite being younger and inexperienced. So he's trying to sabotage his reputation by getting him drunk out of his mind and causing him to do something humiliating. Something to make his boss, this man, trust him less. The man with the buzz cut will go after the boss's wife next, and he'll undo her by stealing her precious, ornate kamarband. In other words, Bianca, Cassio, Iago, Desdemona, and Othello. Omkara is a Bollywood musical based on Othello. Now, musical Othellos aren't unheard of, just ask Giuseppe Verdi, but Bollywood Othellos? Do they even go for Shakespeare in India? Basically, yes. Not hard to see why something like, say, Romeo and Juliet would be popular in Bollywood, given how many of their movies involve people trying to get out of arranged marriages so they can follow their hearts. And you could see how Othello would be popular in India, given that one of the key stories in Hindu mythology involves a woman being unfairly accused of adultery by her warrior husband. And it's not hard to see Bollywood going for anything that could be adapted from anything else. There's a Bollywood Mrs. Doubtfire, for Christ's sakes. But that's surface stuff. Shakespeare and India actually go a long way back. India has a complicated relationship with Shakespeare because India has a complicated relationship with all things British. For obvious reasons.
Why?
I don't know, man.
The first appearance of Shakespeare in India was a company of British expatriates performing for other British expatriates working for the East India Company. The oldest recorded performance took place in 1780 in Calcutta. It was a performance of Othello. These performances continued and grew in popularity not only among the British, but among Western educated Indians. And Indians weren't just patrons, they were also performers. The first Indian to do Shakespeare on stage was a Bengali man named Vaishnab Charan Addy, who played the title role in an 1848 production of Othello. These performances proved popular among Indian audiences, who could understand them thanks to this man, Lord Thomas Babington Macaulay, who devised an education system that emphasized English in its curriculum. Quite infamously, he claimed that after querying his colleagues about Indian literature, one sec, let me see if I can get the tone right. I have never found one among them who could deny that a single shelf of a good European library was worth the whole native literature of India. What about the Ramayana? No thank you, I already had lunch. Anyway, because of that bit of colonial douchery, English literature became a major fixture of the Indian education system. The world's first courses on Shakespeare weren't taught in England, but in India. So, an English-speaking educated Indian elite was willing to patronize touring Shakespeare companies well into the 20th century, even after independence in 1947. So Shakespeare has a weird place in India. On the one hand, he was a tool of colonization, as a way to cut Indian culture off of the root. But on the other hand, his stories are still popular, and generations of Indians have found ways to colonize Shakespeare themselves. Instead of making themselves English, they've made Shakespeare Indian. This is also an Indian Othello, done as a traditional Kathakali dance drama, a style as old as Shakespeare himself. This is also an Indian Othello, Kaliyatam, a 1997 Malayalam film, done in one of the many, many languages spoken in India. But this is an Indian Othello done in a style that's most familiar to Westerners, Hindi language cinema, Bollywood. Though as I said before, director Vishal Bhardwaj is more of a realist than most Bollywood filmmakers. Like, compare Omkara to a movie like Dil Wale Duhanya La Jayenj. I don't speak Hindi. It was filmed in real places, but it's clearly not set in a real place. It's set in a magical music land, where a character with no ostensible musical talent can suddenly become a singing siren. Not unlike American musicals, actually. But Omkara? Aside from the one character who is actually a singer in-universe, no one sings. Most of the music is non-diegetic and doesn't stop the reality of the situation to call attention to itself. So this fight scene doesn't become a heavily choreographed ode to the hero, it's just his badass theme song.
सरत घोड़ों पे लगाते हैं कठोर, शेरों पे नहीं। अरे धम 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 धड़म धड़ैया रे, सबसे बड़े लड़ैया रे, ओंकारा रे, ओंकारा।
And Ajay Devgan and his inhumanly perfect torso make for a striking presence as Othello, Omkara. But like most productions of the play, he's overshadowed by the villain. Reviews of the film gave some hefty praise to Saif Ali Khan as his film's Iago, though here he's called Langda, which apparently means limp in Hindi. Okay, I know some Hindi, though the language is also worth mentioning. This movie's set in and filmed in the province of Uttar Pradesh in northern India. For non-Indians, that's the one with the Taj Mahal. And so the characters don't speak Hindi proper, they speak in a rural dialect, native to the areas around Delhi. Also, they swear. That's the thing. We're not dealing with nobility, as in Shakespeare. We're dealing with backcountry thugs. Everything in Othello is legal. Well, okay, not murder, but Shakespeare's characters are in an army. They're soldiers. They run in socially accepted circles. Here, like in West Side Story, it's about crime. Uttar Pradesh Side Story. I'm so sorry for that pun. I need to... forget it. Another interesting thing is how Bhardwaj makes the play a bit more feminist. Well, as feminist as you can get for a play that runs on slut-shaming and ends with an honor killing. But he gives the women in his play a greater voice. For example, he gives the Amelia character this speech about how all men are vulnerable to institutionalized sexism. Even bolder, he alters Othello's speech to the Venetian Senate. It's one of the best speeches in all of Shakespeare, but here, Othello doesn't deliver it. Sure, the scene is still there, he's still accused of stealing Desdemona, or Dolly as she's called here, but Bhardwaj takes that act of agency away from Othello and gives it to Desdemona. She explains why she loves him. Even more radical, in Shakespeare, Iago uses his wife Amelia as a pawn in his revenge, and in the final act, as she reveals her role in the plot, he kills her. In Bhardwaj, 400 years of Iago killing his wife, and finally the tables are turned. Oh my god, that is so satisfying. But the biggest change to the text? Well, Ajay Devgan has a slightly darker complexion than Kareena Kapoor.
का जोड़ी है बिल्कुल जैसे कोयले के लोटे में दूध.
But Othello and the rest of the cast aren't separated by race. Instead,
और फिर अपने फूल को उस दैत्य के हाथ में कैसे सौंप? जात का भी तो आता है.
They're separated by caste. Omkara's father was high caste and his mother was low caste, therefore making him an... I almost said outcast.
पर अपनी बेटी के दिल की बात नहीं सुन सके. कठोर.
Now the caste system is very, 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 very complex, and if you understand it fully, congratulations, you are Indian. This was a big barrier for me as a Western viewer, one, because I knew next to nothing about the subtleties of the caste system going in, and two, I and most other people who were taught this play have learned to see it as a story about race. The source material was certainly about race. The play was based on Un Capitano Moro, a short story by the Italian poet Cinthio, in which his version of Desdemona says, "I fear that I shall prove a warning to young girls, not to marry against the wishes of their parents, and that the Italian ladies may learn from me not to wed a man who nature and habitude of life is strange from us." Holy shit. And as for Shakespeare, well, I'll just say that the role that race plays in Othello is worth an essay unto its own. But whether or not the play Othello saved the character Othello from Cinthio's racist slander, Othello has remained one of the most complex and coveted roles for black actors in the Western theater. That tends to be played by a white guy in blackface. Ugh. The point is, Othello has always been about race. At least in the West. So the director chose to make it about a great Indian divide, caste. Yes, India tried to abolish the caste system after independence, but old sociopolitical systems die hard. Caste is brought up in the film, mostly by older characters like Dolly's father, but the point gradually fades away as the focus shifts to a web of deception that Iago is weaving. Now, caste is still a major force in Hold it! Why isn't Omkara Muslim? No, really, I mean, why not? It's not like India hasn't dealt with religious violence since forever, and that would actually tie it back to the play. Moors are from Morocco, after all. The text could be read as the story of a converted Muslim in Christendom, just as much as a story about a black man in a white world. He's a Moor, a former Muslim, fighting in an army in constant battle with Muslim Turks. He even ends his time on stage by making a really ugly reference to religion. "Set you down this, and say besides that in Aleppo once, where malignant and turbaned Turk beat a Venetian and traduced the state, I took by the throat the circumcised dog, and smote him. Thus." He brags about killing a Muslim, and then he kills a Muslim. Himself. But maybe I'm just making excuses because I'm an American and I'm way too distant from caste politics to actually comment on it. You might think that Indians, who are familiar with that system, might critique it, but escapist Bollywood tends not to comment directly on caste, but only infer to it. Because caste is inherited, certain family names have been associated with certain castes. So for an Indian viewer of Omkara, seeing a cast of characters named Tyagi, Tiwari, Upadhyaya, Mishra, and Shukla, those would all register as North Indian Brahmin names. Of course, that's another level unto itself. Brahmins are the priestly caste, and priests, definitely in post-Gandhi India, were non-violent. But these guys? They're practically good fellas. Thing is, modern India has moved past the caste system. There's greater social mobility, the Dalits have more protection under the law, there are incidents of caste-related violence across the country happening on an almost yearly basis. Basically, caste is no longer a problem in India in the same way that race is no longer a problem in America. The film manages to comment on the caste system by living within its gray areas. Omkara is an outsider because of his birth within the caste system, but if no one's following their caste-determined social roles, then what the hell does caste even mean anymore? And why should Omkara still be an outsider? Most interestingly, Omkara is half-caste, but his name in Sanskrit means Om symbol, the syllable uttered in prayer in Hinduism, Buddhism, Jainism, and Sikhism. It's a sacred symbol. I wonder how subversive it is to make a half-caste man so holy. But like all issues worth talking about, caste is very, very multifaceted, and a foreigner like me doesn't really have the proximity to the issue to really comment on it. But Bhardwaj does, certainly more so than other Bollywood filmmakers. The Hindi film industry tends to be comfortably escapist, eschewing social commentary, but Bhardwaj deserves credit for simply asking the question. So just as Robbins, Lawrence, Bernstein, and Sondheim saw their own country's problems in Shakespeare, so did Vishal Bhardwaj for his country. Shakespeare has a way of being modern like that. Of course, William Shakespeare is 450 years old. He's definitely pre-modern. So if these films can use Shakespeare to comment on the present, has anyone used him to comment on the past? Well, hi.